Today we're going to discuss some watercolor techniques. So hopefully you set up all the writing. We have 10 watercolor techniques that you're going to learn about. Today we're going to do the watercolor pencils, dry on dry, wet on dry, wet on wet, and variegated wash. Before you start doing this, make sure you have your paper set up with all of the written descriptions numbered. All right, so I recommend you practicing these techniques on little practice papers that you can make, or on a separate piece of paper in your sketchbook, in your watercolor sketchbook, right? Okay. Super important to practice. Okay. All right, so also make sure you have your color wheel near you. You're going to use this to help you create some effects. And of course you need water and your brush and watercolor paper and your watercolor pencils and your watercolors. Okay, so I know that we already discussed the watercolor pencils in class, but I'm going to do a different version of it. I'm going to actually use a heart theme for this entire lesson, just because I thought it would be fun. It is February. So I'm going to make a heart first. So what you want to make sure is you have a piece of paper that's going to fit inside each one of these sections. Okay, so I cut a little piece of paper. I like to use cardstock because then it's easier to trace with. So I'm going to fold my paper in half, and then I'm just going to draw half of a heart and try to fill up that paper. You don't want to have a really tiny heart. Okay, so that looks pretty good. By folding it in half, I will have a perfectly symmetrical heart. So then I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut out my heart. And keep both parts. Don't throw this away. It'll come in handy. So I've got this, and then I've got this. Okay, so now I'm going to use this. Actually, I like using this better. I'm going to trace with a pencil. I'm going to lightly trace the heart. Okay. All right, so I'll go a little darker so that you can see that. All right, so our next step is we're gonna obviously use watercolor pencils for the watercolor pencil technique. I know we did the rose in class, and we used, for one of them, we used darker and lighter values of red, violet. So you can create values with any color. Let me show you this real quick so you get a visual. I like visuals, they always help me. So you see this is the pure red right here, right? If you add a little bit of black to the red, you can make it darker. Add a little more black, make it even darker. Add a lot of black, it's super dark. These are called shades, okay? What if you want to make it lighter? It's called a tint. You add white, more white, and then a lot of white. So you can go lighter and lighter and lighter until you get to pink for the tint of red, okay? So we're going to be creating value in our heart, and it really doesn't matter what color you use. I would stick with red or violet or blue. I wouldn't really go with the lighter colors like orange or yellow or green, because sometimes it looks a little muddy. And as a beginning watercolorist, that might be too much of a challenge and you might get frustrated, okay? Why don't we just do red? Okay, I'm going to put this right here so you can see it. And what I'm going to do is, if I have this set, which it doesn't have a lot of colors, it's great, doesn't matter. you're going to create tints and shades with your red, right? There's that pure red. And then we're going to get the black to create some shade, and then the white to create some tint. Okay, now if you're lucky enough to own a very large set of watercolor pencils, like I've got these, you can see there's lots of tints and shades already built in, making your life somewhat easier. Okay, but we're going to do that with this. So what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to take the black first, and I'm going to kind of outline it just like I did with that rose. Remember how I outlined the rose in a dark, like a shade of the red violet? I went pretty dark. I'm going to do the black. Now I'm going to go pretty thick. You can see I'm kind of going over it and adding a little bit of shading almost in there. Okay. And I guess I'll do a little bit on this side too. I'm going to go a little lighter on this side. Okay, and now I'm going to take my red. I'm going to overlap the red over the black. And then color in part of the heart. I would press pretty hard with your color pencil to get a lot of pigment on your paper. Okay. So I'm not going to fill it up all the way because now I'm going to add some white. I'm just going to kind of overlap my white a little bit over the red. And just kind of fill it with white. And let's see how this goes. I kind of wish I hadn't done the black there, but that is why you want to practice on a practice paper. Okay, learn from my mistakes. Alrighty, so, because I was kind of thinking I could go dark to light, but now that I added that black, that might be a bit of a challenge. Well, what I can do is I think I'm going to erase it. Will that work? Oh yeah, cool. Okay, I'm going to erase it. And let's see what happens. All right, now I'm going to grab my brush and my clean pot of water. And I'm going to go ahead and see what happens with this. It's kind of unpredictable magic. So I'm going to start over in the black and dab the black, and notice how that black is kind of blending with the red. Woo. All right, now I'm a little concerned because there is a lot of pigment on my brush. All right, I do want to kind of blend that. I want like a soft transition. So notice how I'm dabbing, because when I dab, I have more control over the brush and the paint. All right, I'm getting smaller sections. This requires some patience. Okay, so just to be on the safe side, I think it'll be all right. If you're noticing as you're going across your heart that your color is still really dark, you might want to clean your brush in the water. I'm going to do that a little just to be on the safe side. And now I'm going to just continue. And I'm going to bring that over a little more. Okay, so now I'm going to move into the white area. And notice how it's getting lighter and lighter because of the white. Now I do want to have it even lighter, so I got to get rid of some of the pigment on my brush. I'm going to go over here now and loosen up this pigment and then let the water bleed into the red. Okay, so I want that to have a better transition, so I'm just going to dab a little. And then create that value, lightness or darkness of a color. I'm going around here. I'm going to leave a little bit of white to kind of show a little bit of reflection. Ooh, it's almost gone. Oh, that's okay. I can always go back and add with a white pen. Okay. Bring that in a little more. All right, I think that looks pretty good. Okay, there we go. So there we have our watercolor pencils. So really the goal is to try to get that transition from dark to light by overlapping. So I did the black here, I added the red, and then I did the white over here. Okay. All right, so let's move on to dry on dry. So dry on dry basically means a dry brush on dry paper. Now, I definitely recommend practicing this. This can be a very challenging technique because basically it kind of goes against logic that your dry brush is going to get some paint on the paper, right? Because, you have to wet your brush, right? Or your paint has to be somewhat wet, right? Obviously it's a little wet. Okay, so let's grab the watercolors. All right, and be careful you don't smudge this. Super important. I'm going to move this out of the way. All right, I'll put this over here. Okay, so what I want to do is first make sure I get my brush as dry as possible. So basically what I'm doing is I'm getting rid of all the excess water off my brush, okay? And I'm going to go to my red. So I wrote down the names of all the colors to help me. And I don't want a pool of water in the watercolor, the little pot, because if there's too much water, I won't get the dry on dry technique, okay? So I do want to kind of show you a really good example that I made of a dry on dry technique with some grass. And you can see that basically the brush is so dry that you can see a little bit of the white paper underneath, okay? And this is a really nice effect for grass, for example, okay? It's not an effect I use, or a technique I use a lot, but you might want to use it when we do one of our projects. Okay, so let's go ahead now and try to see if we can get that. So I'm going to practice. So there I'm getting it a little. You can see that right there. I'm getting that a little. I want to have and there not so much. So what I do is I kind of just keep getting rid of all the excess water and paint off my brush until I get it the way I want to. I'm not going to say this is easy. You just do the best you can, all right? And then I'll see if I can get that. Yeah, it's not working as great as I'd like it to. I'm going to go back and get a little more color. See there, I'm getting it. That's what I want. And then okay, it's okay. Not great. I'll just turn my paper over and try again. Yeah, there, that's what I want. Okay, so I'm just going to now draw that heart. All right, I'm not going to color it in. Now, you could trace your heart first if you want to help you. Okay, so there we have the dry on dry technique, right? Okay, so let's move on to wet on dry. So wet on dry is basically a wet brush on dry paper. Okay, it's pretty straightforward. So I'm going to very quickly trace my heart so I know exactly where it goes. I'm going to trace it in my red watercolor pencil, just that way you can see it better. Okay. All right, and then I'm going to wet my brush and pop it in my palette. So notice how I'm lifting a little bit of color now from the palette, loosening up that color. So I keep adding a little bit of water in there. Okay, so now I'm just going to go ahead and first outline it. And I'm going to fill it with paint. So notice you can use brush strokes to fill it in now if you want. I'm going to clean it up a little though. I'm going to add a little more red. You don't want to go too dark. So when I say too dark, this is what I mean. Okay. You want to be able to kind of see the paper shimmer through. So what do you do if it's too dark? You can get rid of some of the color on in your cup of water. All right, that's better. Okay. You want to see that paper shimmer through a little because this is not acrylic. Okay. This is watercolor. So too dark. So dip your brush in the water, get rid of it, and then test it out. Okay, I think that's a pretty good red, right? Okay, so always use your tester first. Maybe you can always add color if you need to, right? Okay, so that was just my quickie. Okay, so let's move on to wet on wet. So wet on wet basically means wet brush on wet paper. Okay, I'm going to move this over a little. Okay, so what you want to do for this one is make sure you have, I would make sure you have clean water. Take your brush, wet it, and then wet your paper, okay? Okay, so I wet the paper. Oops, I forgot to sketch out my heart. Oh well, I'm going to freehand it. Okay, so it's nice and wet brush on wet paper. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to dip my brush in the water and I'm going to draw the heart. So watch what's going to happen. It's going to bleed out. Okay. Now, it's an interesting technique. I'm going to fill that up. I'm going to go back and add a little more color because I want it to be a little darker. So you're not going to get clean lines with the wet on wet technique. Okay, this is really good for clouds or tie-dye effects. I'll show you a tie-dye effect in class. You could basically just add more colors to the edge of it and create a really cool tie-dye effect. Like, let me see, I know I have an example. Or not. Okay, well, I thought I had one. That's okay. All right, well, you get the idea. See how it's going to bleed out, okay? All right, I'm going to add a little more because I don't want to lose lose the shape of my heart. And sometimes when you want it to bleed out more, like see how it bleeds out really nicely on this side? It's kind of wispy, like clouds. I'm going to go over here and I want to drop a little more water on it because I want it to do the same thing on the other side. All right, so you kind of get some more abstract art. Remember, it's not realistic. Abstract art is not realistic. Okay, I think it looks pretty cool though. It's like I'm gazing at a cloud that looks kind of like a heart. All right, so now let's move on to my favorite one. It's called a variegated wash. So I kind of drew this out already. I don't expect you to do this, but I wanted to have some fun. But I'm telling you right now, you are definitely needing to practice this on a little piece of practice paper. And it's also really important when you do a variegated wash to pick colors that are going to go well together, okay? That is why you need the color wheel, okay? So I did a variegated wash on my S right here, and I used red, violet, and then light blue, okay? So some people like to use this variegated wash for something called a galaxy effect, which is really pretty. I actually use that on my phone. I made a really cool phone cover. I can't show it to you because I'm filming right now with my phone, but I'll show it to you in class. So basically, you're going to want to combine two colors. Variegated means different. So different colors, all right? So I am going to check out my color wheel, and I'm going to tell you what I think looks really good together, and you can experiment on your little pieces of paper and see which colors you like best. I love red, violet, and a lighter version of blue. Okay, that is what I used on my S. What also looks good is the blue green with blue violet, and red and yellow look good because when you combine red and yellow, you can get yellow, orange, and orange in there. Okay, so I would experiment and see which ones you like best. I'm going to experiment with you and show you what I mean. The secret to making a variegated wash work is to dab your brush. Okay, so I'm going to pick my favorite color right now. I love the red violet. It is so beautiful. Okay, now don't be like me and have this paper underneath because you might stain it. I'm keeping it here just for the video. So I'm going to just kind of dab. So remember, you're practicing this. I want to go a little darker so you can see it better in the video. Okay. Oh, look, my heart's practically disappeared. That's all right. Okay, so you do want to load your brush with quite a bit of water, okay? And then now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go clean my brush and go to that beautiful light blue that I have in this palette. And then I'm overlapping a little and dabbing, and see what happens? It kind of bleeds together. Leave a little bit of white showing here and there because it looks really pretty when you do that. And obviously what you're going to get in the in-between right here is kind of a violet, right? So to create that kind of cotton candy effect, if you will, you want to add a little bit of water, all right? That's the fun part. And the fun part is really just experimenting with this. It is so pretty, all right? So this is red, violet, and light blue. Now let's play around with red over here. Okay, that's a little dark, but that's okay. I'll just add a little bit of water to it. So there's my red. I'm going to clean my brush really well because remember, yellow is very light and we don't want to contaminate our yellow. Get some yellow, got to lift it up a little and overlap with the red and see how it starts to bleed together and create orange. Okay, I'm going to add some more water on my brush and kind of just dab. All right, and then I get that beautiful variegated wash. Okay, I'm going to go back to my red, drop a little bit of red here. Ooh, I don't want to get rid of all the yellow, so I'm going to clean my brush, go back and get some more yellow. Okay, that looks really cool. Okay, so remember, do not do brush strokes. It won't work. You'll blend all your colors together and then you'll just get one color. Okay. All right, I recommend you practice with this color combination or this one. If you try to do variegated wash with colors that are opposite one another, those are called complementary colors, remember, you will get brown, okay? You want to do colors that are neighbors, analogous colors, right? Okay. Or pick colors that I'm telling you that I know look good together just because I've been practicing this, okay? So play around with red, violet, and a light version of the blue. And if you just have a regular blue, that's fine. And if you don't have a red, violet in your color palette, you can make it, okay? I know some of you have the smaller color palette. So remember, you can take red, all right, and blue. Now, I wouldn't take too much blue. Kind of blend them. They're a little dark for me, so you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go get some white and mix it in there. Okay, so you kind of have to keep experimenting until you get that red violet. I'm going to go back and add a little more of the blue, just a little. Okay. It's not quite as good as the one that's in here. It's a little dark. Okay, but you know, you experiment with it and see what you can get. And if you don't like it, you know that you've got red and yellow in your palette, so maybe you just want to do red and yellow instead. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to have a little bit of fun, and I'm going to fill my heart, and I'm using the red violet. I'm going to fill my heart with the variegated wash. Okay, so remember to dab. Now I'm going to go around those little drops. I made drops just to make my life really complicated. Okay, so I'm going to figure those drops out later. I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet, but okay, so I got my red violet. Now, if you feel like you're losing control of your color, get rid of some of the water on your brush by just going up against the edge of your water, okay? Because you don't want it to bleed out of the lines of your heart, okay? So now I'm going to go and I'm going to get my blue. And notice how I'm dropping it at the edge. And I want it, because I want it to bleed together, right? I'll drop a little more over here. Okay, and then I'm going to go back and add a little more red. Oh, it's a little dark. That's okay. I just add some water on my brush and drop the water on there. And I continue to fill the heart with the red violet. So my red violet's kind of overpowering the blue, so I got to go back and get some more blue in there. It's a little dark, so once again, I cleaned my brush, and now I'm just dabbing. I'm just going to dab to fill in the area. Use brush strokes just to define the edge. And create that beautiful variegated wash, which some people like to call galaxy effect, or like my elementary school kids like to call it cotton candy. Okay. All right. So there is my heart for the love. I'm going to wait for this to dry before I even touch any of this, because actually I'm not even sure what I want to do yet. I might end up just doing silver and do something completely different without watercolor. Okay. All right, so I'm going to leave it, put it aside, be really careful. Do not put your paper sideways, because then everything will drip down and create drips that you don't want. All right, and we will continue with the other watercolor techniques next week.